Oh my gosh, today we are going to cover such an exciting topic. We are going to be talking about psychologically supportive prayer. Prayer is one of those things that there's not direction necessarily given. And then there's also this aspect where you don't want to give too much direction on it because it is essentially meant to nourish a personal relationship with a, immaterial being or force. So there's something like very personal about it that you don't want to be too rigid with. So it's kind of this like balance when it comes to counseling. Spirituality and religion is not tapped on a lot because a lot of counselors don't feel confident talking about it. And there's also things you have to keep in mind when it comes to ethical considerations and also working with culturally diverse clients. Like, people have different belief systems and you have to respect that. So I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you about psychologically supportive prayer. There's more and more research coming out about prayer and how it could be connected to our wellness. And there's very specifically one article that I will link that talks about unpacking the relationship between prayer and anxiety. This is on the National Institutes of Health website and was specifically published through the National Library of Medicine. So like I said, I'll link it. You can read it for yourself, but I'm also going to just summarize a lot of the key points that stood out to me and how you could implement the information into your own experience with prayer. Regardless of what religion or spiritual ideology you have, I hope that this could be a beneficial video for you regarding the topic of prayer. I even have my laptop to make sure that I hit on some very specific points that stood out to me that I see as significant in all of this. So first and foremost, prayer is really seen as the vehicle in which we get to build a personal relationship with a higher power, whatever you define that as. In psychology, spirituality is defined as developing a relationship or connectedness to an immaterial force or being. That relationship should inspire senses of connectedness and overall wholeness. That's how psychology is defining spirituality. If spirituality is the process or the destination, prayer is really the vehicle that we use to experience and nourish and fuel this relationship. Ultimately, it's seen as an interaction with God. And this is really what differentiates secular meditation from spiritual meditation or prayer. Secular meditation would be seen as something like a series of mantras that focus on I affirmations. There isn't this integration of immaterial force or being. So things like I am strong, I am loved, those are considered like secular meditations. However, if you're focusing on a higher power, that's when it turns into a spiritual meditation or what many would call a prayer. Really what they're seeing in this article, so that's just some overview. Now diving into this specific article, they're noticing that really the purpose and the intention of your prayer matters when it comes to wellness. Remember, the goal here is psychological wellness, mental and emotional wellness. That's the goal. So they'll see different levels of anxiety and even depression based on various styles of prayer. Those things change. Sometimes we might pray for ourselves, we might pray for others. Sometimes we share notes of gratitude or devotion towards that higher power. And other times we may just share reflections and experiences with that higher power, just like you would have a conversation with a friend or a family member as you process an experience that you had. Overall, it's less about the quantity of praying and more about the quality or the style of your prayer that is going to impact your overall wellness. Like I said, not all of these styles are created equally. So let's just dive into some of the details that this article provides. Ultimately, like, I'm just going to go through these different styles of prayer and kind of expand on them. But praying for others can be associated with an increase in wellness simply because it inspires optimism or empathy. So that would be, praying for someone's health, or praying for someone's relationship dynamic, or just keeping someone else in mind and taking that consideration to this higher power. However, I want to note that how we perceive this higher power is super important in the anxiety we may feel amidst these styles of prayer. So if someone sees God as being, or higher power as being cold or distant, that's going to definitely impact and is actually connected to higher levels of anxiety. You can increase your sense of closeness and intimacy with this higher power by really focusing on notes of gratitude and devotion when you pray. So really just noticing, I'm sure that you've been introduced to the idea of how impactful gratitude can be on our mental health in general. And so when we link this with a layer of spirituality, it's not only benefiting us psychologically by increasing our awareness of gratitude and optimism and positive affect and, just curating the mindset, right, of seeing the good in life. That's all psychological benefit of it. But now kind of marrying in the spirituality, it would attribute those good things to this higher power. And that's what starts to build this sense of intimacy and closeness with this higher power. This article actually defines something called attachment to God. And when there's a secure attachment to God, it's linked to this idea that there is an emotional responsiveness from a higher power, and that there is a secure base within that relationship to view the world from. And it contributes to a sense of emotional safety. I thought that was really interesting because I am familiar with the discussion of attachment when it comes to relationships. There's something called attachment style. We all have an attachment style, and it may differ from relationship to relationship, but it dramatically impacts how we interact in our relationship when seeking love and connectedness and intimacy. It also can impact how we respond and what we think and how we act when we're not feeling that sense of intimacy and connectedness. So you may have, there's 4 different styles of attachment. There's secure, which is, the aim. There's anxious, avoidant, and then there's disorganized, which is a little bit of a mix of avoidant and anxious. So remember, you can have different styles in different relationships. Often our relationship with our mother will impact which one we have as a baseline. And keep in mind, though, your attachment style can change over time. And it can change in a relationship depending on how that interaction is nourished and what kind of tools you may integrate into your relationship and communication. So this article is specifying, like, secure attachment to God is linked to these benefits that you would see in, like, a secure relationship, emotional safety and vulnerability, and then emotional responsiveness, really. So I thought that was really cool. And I think it's important to highlight because, as I said, your relationship with your mother is going to impact your baseline attachment style that you come to a relationship with. Now, if you're not conscious of your attachment style, you're going to be, number one, walking into any relationship and have this baseline that you're not fully aware of in regards to how you emotionally engage or emotionally respond to meet your needs of intimacy, or when those needs of intimacy are not being met. Now, that translates, according to this article, that translates to our relationship with an immaterial force or being. So if we have an anxious or avoidant or dysfunctional attachment style, we may approach our relationship with an immaterial force or being through that lens. whether it's impacted by religion or your own path of spirituality. It's really important to note that. Sometimes I've noticed that the goal of psychologically supportive spirituality is different from what religion may define or may encourage even. And that's why I'm kind of on this mission to highlight psychologically supportive spirituality, is because instead of making the religion the bar and the standard, we can actually hold our psychological wellness as the bar and the standard. I believe that we are made in the image and likeness of God, and that there is this divine aspect and, impression of our higher power on us and on the creation of us. And so I see that there will be a support of our true, foundational being within healthy spiritual practices. And so if you hold that standard of psychologically supportive spirituality, you can learn about different styles of spiritual ideology, and instead of being overwhelmed or confused on discerning truth, there will be some alignment happening with that image that we're created in. Now, if we don't understand psychological wellness and that standard, that's going to be really muddy waters to navigate through. So my hope in sharing this information is to kind of add and bring some clarity to that. So that kind of went off on a little bit of a rabbit trail tangent on that, but I feel like it's really important to emphasize. So going back to these different styles of prayers, we talked about prayer being the vehicle, praying for others can increase wellness. How we perceive this higher power is really essential, but it also, I brought that up because devotional style of prayer, gratitude, notes of gratitude towards that higher power is actually going to increase your sense of connectedness and intimacy with that higher power. So that's a really big deal. It also helps us view our problem and challenges from a different perspective, and so that could be really helpful psychologically. Ultimately, so those are kind of just some expansions on the different styles of prayer. Now I want to get into some considerations to think about when you pray. So the expectations that we have on our prayer is directly linked to differing levels of anxiety. What this article means by that is that the higher expectation you have on your prayer being answered in the exact way that you want it to be answered is connected to higher levels of anxiety. It is also connected to this idea that if we don't have our prayers answered in a certain way, that God might not love us, that we might not be able to trust God or that higher power. And then it also may make us think that we're not important to that higher power. So that's really, really pivotal, that we're being intentional with our prayer. And I would argue we do not have expectations on our prayers to be met in a certain way. If we do, you're going to see some of these things pop up. Higher levels of anxiety, less love and trust with our higher power, and we're not going to feel as important to our higher power. Now, they researched a group of older people, and they noted that when they were open and receptive to their prayers being answered in ways outside of what they perceived, that they had higher levels of self-esteem and life satisfaction. That's pretty cool. That's really interesting. So that's just really helpful to be aware of. It also encourages this idea that we should be willing to kind of wait for a response from the higher power and accept, if something comes up different than we thought. That's really pivotal to consider in your style of prayer, whether or not you have that or what your natural style is. What else? Those were kind of the main highlights that I saw in this article. So Okay, so that was just kind of going into the article. So what would, a prayer pattern or style look like that is psychologically supportive? Well, number one, just integrating a practice of prayer, at least every day, at least once a day. And you may think about it more than just once a day, which is, great. And at the same time, look at it like you're investing in curating a sense of relationship with this higher power. And if you're watching this video, you most likely determined that that is helpful to you in some way. It is showing to contribute to higher levels of wellness and resilience through psychological research. So if you haven't been considering investing in your spirituality, maybe now is the time to consider it in general. But your prayer is going to be this vehicle to a connection with the higher power. By opening yourself up to, this higher power answering your prayer in a way that higher power sees best can also be of benefit. Really feeding those notes of gratitude in your prayers to this higher power is like first and foremost priority when you are praying, in order to build that sense of connection, intimacy, love, and trust. This will also fuel that secure attachment to this higher power, which is going to make you feel like you have emotional security, emotional safety, and that, there could be a relationship of emotional responsiveness from that higher power. Whoa, those are all huge. You get some really, really big things just by nourishing notes of devotion and gratitude for that higher power. So lots of psychological benefits just come from that one style. Being able to express feelings and reflections, and even like praying for yourself can also fall in line with this prioritization of wellness, simply because it's going to help you potentially look at your problems and challenges from a different lens, maybe broaden your perspective a little bit on them. And then praying for others can increase your sense of optimism and empathy. Really cool stuff. So that's what your prayers might look like, and kind of some qualities that they might have within them. So that's just like looking from a psychology lens. Now, from a real practical lens, they're seeing that people have higher counts of prayer, like higher quantity of prayer, when they have higher states of anxiety. And so I think you would see this if someone's dealing with a really stressful situation. They're going to be more likely to pray more often, potentially seeking guidance or support, or seeking that emotional intimacy and sense of love and trust and emotional security. So on a real practical level, if you're feeling that tension, you're feeling anxiousness, that's why these various styles of prayer can be really helpful. I think that according to this article, the most powerful and psychologically supportive style of prayer for your wellness is going to be notes of devotion and gratitude for that higher power. And I think that that's just going to nourish so many things in your life. Prioritize that above all. And then if you see time or think about it, integrating those other styles of prayer throughout it, or throughout your experience of spirituality. So I'm going to just end there. Read the article yourself if this is something that you're interested in. They give lots of goodies and comparisons, and there's so many more details within the article that I didn't highlight. But I just wanted to make this really concise, and I hope that it wasn't too much information, and I hope it gives you some food for thought as you look at exploring prayer and your spiritual wellness. Let me know what your experience is. Let me know if anything in particular stood out to you. I'd love to hear if there's any specific practices that you've integrated that I didn't mention. Let me know. I want to hear about it. Thank you for listening and watching.